So we talked so much about importing data, but what about saving data? Now, the reason why we only talked about importing data is that it's much more difficult, because saving data is much easier than reading data, because if you want to save data, then you usually have it already in a format that works, because you have it in R, so at least that somehow works. So saving it is much easier, because you do not need any adjustments regarding how to import, for example, certain product codes. The only relevant question, or the main relevant question, is about the format you want to save your file into. I would say if there are no good arguments for using a different format, you should go for CSV, because that makes it quite easy to transfer the data across platforms, across operating systems, etc., etc. There is another function, the data table package, fwrite, that actually can be used to save data as CSV. So it has the following main arguments. First mandatory argument is the name of the object to be saved. And the second one that's important is the file argument. That's the file name under which the object should be saved. So pretty straightforward in some sense. Here's an example. Save the object exptab to the file data exptab.csv. So we just call the function fwrite. We specify the argument x by using the name of the file that we actually want to save, and then you specify the optional argument file. Again, using the function here from the here package to specify where the file should actually be saved. So going back to the previous example from the third exercise, assume we have this data set 3s that we would like to save, and we could go into data table, use the function fwrite. We could specify the first mandatory argument x using the name of the data set we want to save, and then specify the file argument using the function here. So in our case, we would like to save it in data. Let's just assume it's still raw data. Let's consider it to be tidied up. So save it in the subfolder tidy. Think of a name. In our case, let's just call it data3 tidy.csv. And then we can basically immediately save the file. Now, in this case, since I've used the subfolder tidy and I haven't created that so far, I will get an error because I want to save the file in a directory that not yet exists. If I look here into my subfolder data, I only see the subfolder raw. So I need to create the folder tidy here before I can save something in there. Now, if I call this function again, I do not get any output here, but if I look into the tidy subdirectory, I now see that this CSV file has been created, and this file here corresponds to that data set there. That is basically it. To wrap up the data import session, first of all, the disclaimer, it's a very underappreciated task. It's very important, but it can also be very frustrating, especially if you use raw data from the internet that hasn't been formatted in an adequate way, and that happens very frequently. Make yourself comfortable before start reading in the data, because you should expect frustration, because that can be actually very tiresome. The general idea here is always you use a function that imports the data and binds and returns the data as an R object. Then you should also think of a name and bind it to this object. Usually the object is data frame or whatever aligns with your preferred dialect. In our case, we use the function fread from the data table package, which by default returns a data table. Since we mostly work with the tidyverse functions, so we use a tidyverse dialect, we immediately transformed this data table into Tibble. Depending on whether you work with tidyverse or base or data table, you should immediately transform the imported data into the data form that aligns more closely with the dialect you're most frequently are about to use. Then you can proceed with transforming this data frame /tibble/data table until it satisfies the demand for tidy data. This is something that we deal with this session on data transformation. And then you can save the data under a new name, save the script, and celebrate yourself. Yeah, because actually, this, especially in combination with the data preparation, data import can be very frustrating, and it takes a lot of time. But it's, as I said, a very important and very underappreciated skill. So it's really worth investing some time into it. As I said, data transformation, data preparation will be taken care of in a separate session. Before we did all that, of course, you should have prepared your project environment. Again, something we have covered in a separate session. So, to summarize and conclude, main goals here of this session was to learn how to import data into R. Main focus here was on CSV files, so we used the function fread from the data table package. If you use other functions that might be a little bit more lightweight for importing CSV files, especially the tidyverse package offers them. There are a lot of other ones. If you don't want to import CSV files but other formats, you should turn to specialized functions. It's easy to find them via Google search, but especially the Haven package is usually a very good first address to check out. Importing standard data often works quite well with the default options, but you should always be carefully check the imported object, whether it aligns with the underlying raw data. If you want to be more transparent or the underlying raw data is a little bit more tricky to work with, you need to use optional arguments, and usually the help function of fread is pretty good. But you also learned, I think, some basic optional arguments that help you to cover the wide majority of cases. Also, if speed or memory restrictions are relevant in your case because data is so huge, I also suggest you to spend some time in comparing the performance of different import functions on the web. This can really save you some time. So, hope you found that useful. As I said, this session is a bit in between the one of project management and the one on data preparation. And maybe these are two very good sessions to check out next. Thank you very much for your attention.